The Kent School District Board meetings are held in public on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month at 7 p.m. at the Administration Center in accordance to the Washington State Open Public Meetings Act. Regular meetings include presentations and reports dealing with district operations, as well as time set aside for public comment. Now, here are your Kent School District Board of Directors. Welcome to tonight's board meeting.
Good evening. I'd like to bring the meeting to order, and I have asked Grant Miller to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Grant. This is a meeting of the board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. We allow opportunity for public comments later in the agenda. If you would like to address the board, please fill out a blue white card with a blue border. It's in the back, and bring it to us to the dais. If you wish to speak to an agenda item, please indicate on the card and your name will be called at that portion of the agenda. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and it is our usual protocol that we are here to listen for understanding. We won't be responding at this time, but staff will get back to you with any questions you may have. Dr. Watts, are there any changes to the agenda?
President Began-Oslo, members of the board, Ms. Howey, and community, thank you for being here. A supplemental personnel report was added to the consent agenda. As you know, printed copies are before you on the dais.
So I'd like to ask for a motion to add the supplemental personnel report to the consent agenda.
I second.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Okay, all those in, you don't have any questions? Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, aye. All those opposed say no. Okay, motion passes. Okay, we are to the recognition portion, and the first proclamation we'll be reading will be for the American Education Week. That'll be your day.
Whereas public education is the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas by equipping young Americans both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future. And whereas public education employees, be they educators, substitute educators, higher education faculty, staff, custodians, teachers, administrators, bus drivers, clerical workers, food service professionals, skilled trade workers, health and student services workers, security guards, technical employees, librarians, educational staff associates, and other support staff work tirelessly to serve our children and the communities with the care and professionalism. And whereas public schools are the foundation of the neighborhoods and communities, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common purpose, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaim the week of November 13th through the 17th, 2017 as American Education Week in the Kent School District, and urges all citizens to join in this observance.
We'll have Mr. Allen Sutton to accept the proclamation.
Everybody, Alan.
Next will be our National Native American Heritage Month proclamation.
I'm pleased to read this proclamation. Whereas the history and culture of our great nation have been significantly influenced by American Indians and indigenous peoples, and whereas the contributions of American Indians have enhanced the freedom, prosperity, and greatness of America today. And whereas their customs and traditions are respected and celebrated as part of a rich legacy throughout the United States. And whereas Native American Awareness Week began in 1976 and recognition was expanded by Congress and approved by President George H. Bush in August 1990, designating the month of November as National American Indian Heritage Month. Proclamations under variants on the name, including Native American Heritage Month and National American Indian and Alaska Native Heritage Month, have been issued each year since 1994. And whereas in honor of National Native American Heritage Month, community celebrations as well as numerous cultural, artistic, educational, and historical activities have been planned. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaims the month of November as National Native American Heritage Month in the Kent School District and urges all citizens to join in this observation.
And we'll have Israel, Mr. Dillon, to introduce Native American Academic and Cultural Liaison, Teresa Lockram.
Thank you. I'd like to have Teresa Lockram join me in accepting this proclamation. Teresa is our academic and cultural liaison for Native American program, and she will introduce any other of the parent community that's here today. So, join me.
I have my teacher right here, Renee Poitras. She's a biology teacher at KM. And we have our parent, Tom Boland, and his son, Satchel. They're here. And I just thank you for coming and thank you for recognizing us. Ganochish.
Okay, so who are we at?
We'll start with Alan.
I did come to represent our educators. So I'll be happy to join you.
Any other educators?
Please report to the photo booth.
I am not. Where do I go?
You're right in the right spot.
All right.
You got it. In the middle? Okay. Thank you. I had done this.
Thank you for the bookmarks.
As everyone knows, we're just finished election season, or almost. And we just wanted to take the opportunity to thank our board director, Agda Borchuk, for her 6 years of service to our community. And I know it takes a lot of work to be on the school board. Very few people know exactly what we do and how much time we spend on policies with our families, listening with, in Agda's case, with our legislative officials, and she has been a tireless advocate and supporter of our district and our community. And so we wanted to publicly recognize Agda for her years of service to our community. And do know she will be very much involved in our school communities in her future roles. But we'd like to present her with something, and so we'd like to ask you to come down. So I'd like to ask everybody also to say a few words about Agda before we ask.
I don't like going first sometimes. So,
Yeah, I was going to say, it's really backward.
So, I've known Agda for a very long time. We worked together in PTA prior to being on the school board, and I have thoroughly enjoyed working with her on the board. This past year, we've had an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better as we participated in Leadership WASDA together, and I have greatly appreciated the amount of work that she has put in, especially in the legislative realm. I know when I first joined the board years and years ago, that was something that I had heard that, you know, we all did all this legislative stuff, and it really wasn't until Agda came back on the board until we really started seeing that happening again. And I know that she's got great things ahead of her. She's going to be offering so much more in so many different areas, but you will definitely be missed. And I just appreciate everything that you do, so thank you so much.
Well, we have a small token that's, I think, very symbolic of your contribution here to Kent School District. You'll notice in the color. And it kind of sparkles, and you do too. So we just wanted to give you this as a token of our appreciation for all the hard work that you put in, and it's been a real joy working with you. And we're not finished yet.
And who are you going to give rides home to? I know.
KSD blue and sparkly
So I can always
bracelet.
think of you when I'm going from here,
Yeah.
so thank you very much.
Yes.
Director Burchard, Agda, there's a saying that goes, and we've talked about this before, that if you think that education is devoid of politics, then you also think you can swim without getting wet. And what we know now more than ever is that politics, power relationships is at the core of what we do. You've been an instrumental part in championing the notion of equity and excellence in community in every way, whether it's through policy, how we support our students, how we interact with one another. I know that one door may close, windows open, and what we talked about, what was just an idea that was growing roots is now the reality, and you'll be able to provide support to, we'll still have support at USD at the highest levels. At the same time, we'll also be able to support, as we've said, the needs and address those underserved populations, those who may still need to be reached even more and are still successful at a higher level. And we appreciate all that you've done. More importantly, we appreciate all that you're going to do. And politics and education will still be there, and you'll still be supporting both for the good of our children. So thank you. And it's been a pleasure to serve alongside you, and I look forward to our serving in different capacities together. Thank you.
got a lot to say.
I got a lot to say. Well, you just said you've been here 6 years. I think I've known you less than 6 weeks. But even in that short time, you started to pour out everything you know and everything you want me to set me up for success. Not just here, connecting me within the community, introducing me to other people you know at different school boards, people I've never met before either. And so really kind of making sure that everything that you learned, everything that you've contributed, goes with other members of the board, even as they're new, even as they're learning 800 things at each meeting, and helping them succeed and making sure that this board and this district go forward. So very short time, completely impressed, and I hope that I'll still get to see more of you.
Thank you.
Before I let you have this, I just want to say one thing. I think more than anything you've brought to us with legislative actions and communication, one of the most admirable things that I feel that is so rare with our public officials is that you have been here at every meeting. You have been here to make the decisions, whether it's popular or not, and we have had many controversial decisions, and it would be very easy to not be here. And you have been here to make those decisions. Whether the public likes it or not, you really think through your decisions, and I've always appreciated that. I just want to share that before I give you the floor. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much from this group of people, and I'm going to miss you all, but yeah, I will be around and be very involved in the district, and I'm sad about leaving, but I'm also really excited about my new role, is that I was elected to Puget Sound Educational Service District's board, and I'm going to be starting in that role in January, so part of my with all of you, as well as the Renton School District, and part of Seattle is the area that I'll be serving. So I'm really excited to continue all the good work that we're doing here and support you in that in Kent. So thank you.
Thank you. We still have another ceremony later. And next up, we are moving into presentations, and we will have a professional development update from Human Resource Chief Officer Mariah Martin and Leadership Development Officer Dr. Luann Decker, presenting the 2017-18 KSD Professional Development Plan.
All right. Good evening, President Vendadassalam. I practiced saying it like 5 times. Vendadassalam. There you go. Board directors, Dr. Watts, Ms. Howley, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share. We're really excited to share this information with you. We had a wonderful time coming together as a huge group of stakeholders from all different areas, and Luann's going to talk a little bit about that, to say what should we be focusing on for workforce development. And that should be driven by our strategic plan. And so in this presentation today, we will present a high-level overview of how the KSD PD plan was created, and we're going to present corresponding funding sources that support this alignment. And it's great because we're going to talk about some things outside of basic education and some of the categorical funds that can really support this work. So as I mentioned, our KSD blueprint, our KSD PD plan is aligned to the blueprint, particularly goal 4, recruit, hire, develop, and retain a diverse and premier workforce. And I'm really pleased in the last year and a half to have had the opportunity to partner with Dr. Decker. Her office is right next to mine, actually, and so I can run right over there and say, hey, what are you thinking about with this or that? And she has been a great partner as we thought about leadership development for our administrators. And this has given us an opportunity to even partner more as she now oversees professional development, and I'm working alongside with our workforce. And so this was another project we had an opportunity to work together on. So what you're going to notice in the plan that we're presenting today is primarily, number one, is it reinforces our core values of equity, excellence, and community in the Kent School District. And what you're also going to notice, and what we're presenting today, is actually our whole process that we use to come up with this plan. Kind of in this idea of continuous quality improvement, really looking at the needs of the organization based on data, gathering input from all our stakeholders, developing a plan aligned to that purpose, and then revisiting and ensuring that that plan is actually working. This is a list of just some of the stakeholders that were present that came into this room and gave us excellent feedback on what we should be doing in professional development, and hearing from all of these groups. This is another way that we gathered input from stakeholders. And one of the things you're going to notice is we had staff needs surveys for both certificated and classified staff. We reviewed student achievement data. Dr. Harmon came in and presented to the team, the whole team of stakeholders, about our student achievement data. So we had those data points as well. And then we shifted to a decision point, really asking each group as a collective to look at our professional development that we have been doing in the past and what we might be wanting to do in the future, and look at it through this idea of what should we keep, drop, or create to ensure we're aligned to the strategic plan. The themes from each of the stakeholder input were then aligned, and everyone had a copy of KSD 2.0 to ensure it was aligned to our most recent strategic plan and our goals for 17-18. And so what we want to do is really narrow the focus while meeting the needs of all our employee groups. I think one of the pieces that I want to highlight that came out of bringing all those folks together was it was irregardless of which employee group was present. One of the themes that came up from each of them was a need to train all employees to be culturally responsive. And this wasn't a question that we specifically asked, but it was a need that rose to the top, regardless of which table anyone sat at. And so, so that was just something that we wanted to highlight, because we really noticed that that was a need that was coming from each of our employee groups. And so what you see on the screen right now is actually the skeletal format of the PSD, or the KSD Professional Development Plan. And so the first major bucket, if you will, is transforming teaching and learning. And so this was very important to all the stakeholders, but really focusing in on how we provide and implement a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Thinking about our social and emotional learning growth bar, we know that that has to be addressed in order for students to be successful in the classroom and must be addressed ethically. Ensuring equitable access by fully addressing individual student learning needs, whether those are special education needs through the inclusive education program, high cap needs, ELL, the list goes on. Building the capacity of the entire workforce. I think the real power of this group coming together was that it was multiple, was all job levels, classified, certificated, so that they could all come together. In the past, sometimes we focused PD on our certificated staff, and although they were very important, our workforce is 4,000 strong. 1,800 of those are certificated teachers, but then we have another, 2,000 or so that need to have their needs met as well. So providing mentoring and coaching opportunities, developing a pipeline for growth for all employee groups as they want to continue to develop, and then, as Luann mentioned, the culturally responsive piece. The how is really important as well. Is an important part of our plan, that we really define what strong professional development looks like. And we know from research that PD should be job embedded, site-based, that teachers, workers, the workforce in general, at their location have the opportunity to engage in elbow-to-elbow work with their colleagues and really learn from one another and grow. Through highly effective PLCs, an important venue for us to continue our learning, and through an integrated, personalized approach that addresses the multiple needs of adult learners, realizing that every learner comes in at a different entry point, and providing a flexible model that supports that. Along with this, it became very clear that if we were going to focus our support and really think through what we wanted to offer, it did not make sense to continuously pull teachers out of the classroom for professional development to improve student achievement. That was actually working at a cross purpose. And so we began to look at the data really closely. How many professional development subs were we utilizing every day? And sometimes it was as high as 75 to 80 across the district. And so fortunately, our substitute services department was able to fill those vacancies, and we didn't have a low fill rate for guest teachers. But we did think about the impact to instruction. And so based on everything that we saw, the data, Executive Cabinet took a look at this, we brought it to a limit of 40 certificated subs per day, 20 for school designated use, to talk about that site-based professional development, and 20 for district designated use. Fridays, we know, are our highest absence dates for both staff and students, so we said those would not be used for professional development. But we can utilize after school, weekends, holidays. And we saw some interest from our workforce to say, why don't you offer classes on Saturdays? I would love to do that. I don't miss class. I have the opportunity to learn. Some of our principals have really stepped up and been really creative and said, so if they can't come to a Saturday class, I could offer an online option for them. And so lots of different ways to think about how can we ensure there's professional development that doesn't remove our staff from their work site or from the classroom. We are continuing to prioritize and come together and work to figure out how can we refine this. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity, schools have the opportunity to do their professional development, but that we don't impact student achievement with teachers not being in the classroom. So then that leads us to Title II allowable expenditures. A bulk of our professional development is funded through Title II, and we wanted to make sure that we fully utilize those resources and thought through all the allowable expenditures. So we continued support in these areas, evaluation support systems and STEM and retaining effective teachers. We had already PD activities that supported that, but we added something new, and you're going to hear a little bit more about this in December when John Sander talks a little bit more about inclusive education and the work they're trying to do there. And then from Scott Nicholson, who is leading our recruitment efforts. And recruitment can now be funded out of Title II, and we are going to specifically focus on our two high need areas, special education teachers and dual language teachers. And we can, that is an allowable expense through Title II, and we have already submitted a plan. The wonderful thing about our Title II submission, as soon as we submitted it, very soon after, we were approved. We did not have to rewrite anything, so we counted that as a real positive. So finally, our next steps, we're going to revise and revisit the allocation funds in December of 2017 in preparation for the carryover allocation. We have approximately $363,000 in carryover dollars from last year that we can continue to utilize and prioritize for professional development. We're going to revise and revisit the substitute allocation. We have a group that continues to come together and say, how is this working? What's not working? Being responsive to principals when they say, I can't get subs and I need to, and really looking at those on a case-by-case basis, but also looking at the overall system. And then we're going to collaborate with all stakeholders regarding the use of subs and or time outside of the day. What are some of those really innovative best practices that principals have put into place or supervisors have put into place to really maximize opportunities outside of the school day? Any questions we'd be happy to entertain.
Start from left to right. Start with it.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to hear what people said they wanted, right? But what do we exactly do, or you might not know yet, to really work on the culturally responsive piece of professional development?
One of the things we were able to do immediately was, and integrate this year, was all our brand new employees for new employee orientation now get at least 1 hour of KSD equity training on culturally responsive. Actually just it's a broad overview of equity and race and equity and our race and equity policy in the Kent School District. And it allows us to really introduce culturally responsive practices. And so that is the very first time that has been integrated right into new employee orientation. And so that was our very first step. I would say one of many. And as you know, and heard earlier when we presented on the most recent update with the race and equity policy, our own KEA had submitted a grant for culturally responsive teaching practices. So lucky to partner alongside them and be able to support their work with that grant as well.
My understanding is that 400 teachers have participated in that training, which is really wonderful.
Is that finished, is the grant?
No, I believe it's still in process, two more years.
Because I went through that training and it was great. So, I highly recommend it for teachers.
But will we be able to, the biggest part is like, will we be able to use that for others as well? Find a way to be able to use some of that for other staff outside of teaching.
Absolutely. I think we need to look at how we can spread that across all work groups.
Yeah.
Likewise, I was really pleased to see that rose up as an identified need, and also the social emotional launch. To see that there too. My question is about the job embedded site-based professional development, and what are some strategies, since that is an effective way to really change people's practices, their learning and practicing these new skills in their workplace. So how do we plan to do that?
What's great about that is we actually have a real kind of, I would call it an elaborate system right now that allows that to happen pretty naturally. We have leaders within transportation, leaders within child nutrition, and so when we get requests of love and logic for the bus driver, right, that's very appropriate for that bus driver, and different techniques for driving. And so those are those really job embedded that come from the workforce that is targeted to and have them develop what they need. That is then comes to the professional development office, so we can offer those courses. And so that way we can really align what the exact needs of that job group is.
And I would say for the teachers, I know the studio model has been a real great opportunity to observe one another and then really reflect and think through, okay, what were some of those moves? But they're doing that work together, they're developing that learning, they're building the structure for that learning together.
One of my questions was about the studio. I know that's an expensive model. Have we trained trainers so we don't have to have outside people come in? Are we still working with studio?
I would say each content area is in a little bit different place. We found it so effective that when it was originally launched with kind of our math studio, we moved it now to ELA, and then I think in some of our other content areas are like, this is a great way to learn and grow. And so we have each group at a slightly different place of phasing in, and I would call that needing district support, and then also phasing out where that district support steps out, and we have those leaders, potentially instructional coaches, department heads, that are able to do that work internally. And we've actually seen this year for the first time some of our schools be able to lead and request studio on their own. And so that is that place where we step back out and we build capacity in the building.
So the 40 certificated subs are specifically for PD?
Correct.
So people doing studio could have those people coming to their classes?
Absolutely. Yes.
I'm curious about the voluntary after school, weekends, those kinds of things. Do we have a feel for how many people are participating in that and per school or per subject area or whatever?
If it was a specific for after school, we would have to probably get some information from one of our school principals and see some of those that are trying that outside the day.
So the important piece too is if it's a required training or if it's an optional. If it's required to do their job, we do have to pay them at their per diem, compensate them at their per diem rate. But we can also offer optional trainings. You're not required to attend. We don't compensate for those. They're optional opportunities. So it really depends on whether or not it's required to do their work. And quite honestly, we're just still opening this up. I think this is a different way of thinking. I know in the district I was in formerly, Saturday trainings everyone did them. It was just part of what you did. That's not necessarily been the culture here. So it's going to be a shift, a change to begin to look at that, and we'll certainly be happy to bring that back and how successful it is.
Thank you. That's all for me.
So the question about this house, you just said it, you're opening it up, you're starting, you mentioned a lot of different varieties, after schools, customization, but some of the inherent challenge with customization and variety is quality. So what measures do you have in place to kind of make sure that the optional professional development is of quality or meets a certain standard to make sure it's useful?
So one of the things that the stakeholder group recommended is a common template for syllabi and for resources and what would be provided, a way to build each one of those opportunities so that there is a level of excellence that they're all meeting. That was a level of interest for a lot of people and importance. And I believe it speaks to what you're speaking of, which is that quality assurance, right? To ensure that even though there's variety, there's still a standard, there's still an expectation for what any person should be able to walk away from that training, what they've learned and can do as a result of that professional development opportunity. Do you want to add to that?
Lisa, I was just wondering about the principal time for professional development. Are teachers able to do any job embedded work or discussions during that?
Absolutely, you have both the principal directed time, and they have been using that opportunity to do a lot of great and rich professional development. And then teachers as well have their teacher directed time. And we are seeing our teachers come together, whether they're meeting in PLC kind of groups or level like groups, and really learning and growing, looking at the data together. But that, of course, that's all directed by them. So lots of different ways that time is being used, whether it's principal directed or teacher directed.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for all your work on this stuff, Dr. Martin. Okay, next is 3.02, our 2016-17 budget update. And to present will be our Fiscal Services Supervisor, Lisa Tyler, and Executive Director, Ralph Fortunato.
President Vengadassalam, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Alley, the audience. Tonight we want to go over we closed the books on 16-17, and give you the review up to date of the financial year review for the just completed fifth fiscal year. So tonight we're going to be covering, we'll be looking at our enrollment compared this year to last year, our staffing, our expenditures. We'll look at expenditures by object, activity, and by program, and we'll look at our revenues, and then we'll look at our ending fund balance. And Lisa will now talk about the enrollment.
Good evening, everyone. So again, as Ralph mentioned, as we walk you through our actual ending operating results for 2016-17, I would first like to review a couple of where we ended our values for, I'll cover enrollment, our staffing levels, and then later on in the presentation I'll go over our total resources. And what I'll be showing is a comparative between the previous 2 years. So we'll show you actuals for fiscal year 16 compared to fiscal year 17. So first of all, enrollment, you can see that, and these figures here that are shown on the slide represent our actual ending annual average FTE. So this isn't October enrollments or budgeted enrollments. These are our actual annual averages. So general enrollment through K-12 you see is up by 260 FTE. iGrad is down slightly. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Running Start is pretty flat between the 2 years. However, I think as we all know, we've seen a growth in Running Start lately. iGrad, it's still a fairly new program, so it's been a little more unpredictable. Just so you can see, fiscal year 16, we saw the 399 dip down last year, but the previous year, fiscal year 14, fiscal year 15, the enrollment was 355. So we've gone 355 up, down, and actually this year it looks like we're going to be up again. I think it's could be closer to about 400 FTE so far. So that's a summary comparison of enrollments. The next comparison I'd like to show is on our staffing levels, and these are again our final values as of August. And so we have increased our staffing levels in instructional staff by over 30 FTE, classified staff just over 5, and administrators just over 5. And just to give you an idea, I looked at the 33 number, and I compared levels as of March, and where we're seeing the increase was in instructional staff. Again, at May, there was an increase from year to year of about 25, and then another 5 was in activity 26, which is nurses, therapists, psychologists. So those are the 2 main areas that would drive the increase. I'm going to talk about the district resources a little later in the presentation, but now we're also going to talk about expenditures.
One thing I want to mention about iGrad is that the state is making us count kids in the program. If they don't meet a certain contact time, we can't count them for funding. But in order for them to get the contact time, we have to serve them. So we still have over 400 students in the iGrad program. We can only count about 350 because they have to get a contact time up. So that's a conundrum that everybody that has an open doors program has experienced in the last 2 years. So talk about expenditures now. I'm looking at the objects. I mentioned before we track expenditures by 3 ways: by program, activity, and by object. And you can see there are certificated pay objects, which includes all of our certificated staff, of course. That's up $10.2 million, and you see the classified up 1.3 or 2.6%. Our payroll, our pay objects, which include your certificated, classified, and the benefits, was up 5.4% overall this year compared to last year. Our overall increase was up 4.14%. Our MSOCs, or non-personnel, was actually down 2.4% compared this year to last year. And the big driver there was in supplies and travel, and you see capital outlay there. And we all know we are in the people business. 85% of our expenditures are personnel expenditures, and 15% is our non-personnel or MSOCs, material, supplies, and operating costs. Give a further breakdown for you here in the pie chart. You see certificated pay objects are 46%, classifieds about 16%, our payroll taxes and other benefits, which would be like retirement, workers' comp, unemployment, about 23%. You see material supplies at 4%, contract services at just under 11%, and travel and capital outlay there.
Rob, just a question on
Sure.
the contract services.
Sure.
How much of that is actually paying people to work with students? Most of it, isn't it? So it's
A good part of that is, yes. All of our contractors that we deal with, something for special ed, those have got to be a contract service. Also in contract services are utilities, about $6 million of that $30-some million is utilities. We pay the running start, that's considered a contract service. We pay these colleges for the tuition, that's a contract service there, that's over $4 million. So just those 2 objects of our $30 million is $10 million for that. So yes.
Thanks.
This is by the activities. And you see our teaching activities and teaching support, those 2 together is 72% of our budget, out of our expenditures this year. It was also about 72% last year also. Of our expenditures was in teaching activities and teaching support. Teaching support would include your library services, your guidance, counseling, psychology, speech and language services, the health services, and instructional, professional development, and instructional technology and curriculum is all in teaching support. You see building administration is that's the principal's office. That would include the principal's salary as well as any office salary, and of course all the consumables that they do in the course of the year. But it's basically just over 7% of our total expenditures went to that activity. Building operations, which is the maintenance and grounds, about 6.5% or $22 million. Central administration, 17.3 million, or just over 5% of the budget. And see, last year was just over 5% also. Transportation is up And that's mainly because of McKinney-Vento. It's over $1 million this year, McKinney-Vento. Food services, pretty much the same as they did last year, and other support services. The big item in other support services, I wish OSPI would actually break this out, the data processing, the IT department is a big part of that. And here it is graphically for you here. Teaching activities is 60%, and then teaching support is just over 12% there. And then we have our programs. Regular instruction, which is your basic ed. That was up $7.3 million. Still have some race to the top, and just see something tonight, there's a little race. There's some leftovers, some carryover, so we have a little bit more to spend on race to the top. Special education and career technical education is up $742,000. Now, if you look at compensatory and other instructional, there were some items last year that were in other instructional, but this year they're now in compensatory. So if you'd like to have to look at those two together, and it's only off $32,000. So basically it's flat between those two. Community services, $402,000, and then support services, which would include central office support, transportation, and food service at $62 million, or up $1.4 million. And here it is graphically for you on the piece of the pie. Regular instruction and support services. 81.5% is in instruction, and 18.5% is then in support services, which is support services and community services. And then Lisa will talk about our revenues that we collected.
Okay, to provide the same two-year comparison on our total resources, which would include revenues as well as our fund balance. You can see if you look down at the bottom right corner, our total resources actually increased by $4 million. But if you break that down into the two pieces, fund balance versus revenues, you can see right off the bat that our fund balance, beginning fund balance, declined by $10 million between the 2 years. So we are very aware of that. But if you look at just the revenues, actually very consistent and nothing out of the ordinary that we see in all of our revenue categories. Local taxes, which is our property tax collections that we receive based on our current levies, we actually increased by 6.8%, and so that's typical. Typically you would see, either a very consistent level of collections or a nominal increase, kind of tied to the economy, as assessed values go, so do our property tax collections. Local non-tax is slightly down. That includes things like fees, fines, tuitions, things like that. In that is also our interest earnings. So with cash levels being down, we would expect our interest earnings to also be down. So that would be a part of that decline, the $500,000 less collection in local non-tax. Our general purpose state funds, that is our apportionment in LEA. So and that is directly tied to our enrollment and the state funding formula. So that is very as expected. State special purpose, these are our state categorical programs such as special ed, LAP, bilingual, transportation and food service. These are based on specific funding formulas for students being served by those programs. So again, very predictable based on our enrollment. The general purpose federal funds are, this is a very small source of our revenue. It's for very specific purposes. You can see sometimes it can be somewhat hard to predict from year to year. It just kind of depends on what's being offered and what services we can apply for, basically. But again, it's as we would expect. Federal special purpose funds, these are federal resources which serve students with special needs, particularly in reading and math. And these are Title I programs and things like that. Even though we see that it's received $730,000 less from year to year, it's not really an impact to our budget because we spend exactly what we get, so it's really a wash with whatever our resources are in that category. Revenues from other districts, that's typically the special ed students that we serve from out of district. So again, entirely dependent on the number of students that we serve. Revenues from other agencies, that is various agreements that we have with again, different entities in support of educational programs. So, you can see they're pretty consistent. Other financing sources, typically what you'll see here is any sale of property that the district receives funds for. We had a significant increase this past year due to a small part of that is also for sale of property, but there were some general fund expenditures that were very appropriately fell under the tech levy. So we see $555,000 of that 577 is actually a revenue transfer from the capital projects fund to the general fund to basically pay for those expenditures for the tech levy. So that is a summary of our resources. Oh, and graphically, it is, so you see how the various categories lay out as far as the piece of the pie. You can see our state general purpose fund, which is our portion that is the most significant piece.
And they saved the best to last for me. So the fund balance. When we ran the trial balance back in the first part of August, end of July, first part of August, we estimated that we will make adjustments of about $3.8 million to the trial balance, which would end our estimated fund balance of a minus $6,946,486, which is the number we've posted. When we actually made the adjustments to the trial balance, we actually had $5.1 million of adjustments, which increased our fund balance by $1.3 million, which actually had an ending fund balance of minus $5,607,909, and that's where we ended up the year when we closed the books. And with that, a couple of things real quick here. We closed the books for August. We're still almost finished with September, so when we have the next board meeting in December, we will bring you through October. We'll have September, and we'll have October for you. And so I'll give you a budget update through October with those two when we meet on. We would have at the end of the month, but we only have one board meeting in November, so we'll come back in December with that information for you, broken out. That for you, what's showing the expenditures, revenues, expenditures, and projecting out, and also showing you the ending fund balance through October. And with that, answer any questions or any comments you have.
Just one question.
Sure.
Can you give me an example of community services programs? What are our programs that fit in?
Well, that would be also when we rent out our gyms or the Sunday for church services. Also, our summer food program is in that also.
Along those lines, what falls under compensatory?
That'd be your Title I, your Title II, your Title III grants. That'd be compensatory. Other instructional would be program, the ICAP program is considered other instructional. If you have, there's some one-time like Gates grant educational programs from the Gates Foundation, those kind of grants, those would be other instructional too. And other agencies would be like Puget Sound ESD for the ECAP program. Those would be also. Another thing I want to mention on local non-tax in not this past current in fiscal year 16-17, but in 15-16, we charged for clock hours, and we always charge for clock hours. We stopped that last year. That's $100,000 right there. The clock hours were. So we don't charge for clock hours anymore.
More of a comment per se into the question. But I'm looking at some stuff. So I'm looking at things we don't really control, which is new taxes coming in. So we have like 14.3 million in new taxes coming in. And on the surface, it looks like we were able to keep cost growth in line such that we only spend $13.5 million more. So on the surface, we're deploying our incremental tax resources appropriately, but fundamentally the base is off.
Where we started, what was off, that was, if we had $10 million to start with, because we actually collected, 14.2, and more this year than last year, but we spent 13. But when you start at 3.8 million, that only gives you 17 million, and then so you're still in the hole.
And so this only shows the 2-year comparison. So it's more of a rhetorical question, but because I can go figure it out. Is this consistent in years to where we're only deploying the incremental tax revenue appropriately, meaning not increasing expenses more than we're getting new revenue in, or is this a recent trend?
No, it's been going on for at least 4 years that we've been spending more than we've been taking in. Okay.
Yes, thank you for that presentation, and I'm glad to see the progress that we're making. I want to acknowledge that. What I'd like to see as well is that how specifically are we getting there with the budget cuts? I think we haven't given enough details to the public. I don't feel very informed either in terms of specific cuts we're making. And particularly when I heard the federal special purpose fund, the 730,000 negative number, we spend what we get. So the question I had when you said that is, what is not getting done with the money that you would have had? And that concerns me. It's a lot of money. So what is going, what is getting neglected?
Well,
so
one of the things with the federal is also a good chunk of what was not collected from this year or last year was in food service, because we have a lower free reduced. And so that's one reason why the food service number was down, why the federal number is down. The federal number, we're on a reimbursement basis with the Fed. So if you spend $1,000, if you send an invoice in for $1,000, you get $1,000, and that's how the federal grant programs work.
But yeah, I was asking specifically about the special purpose fund with regard to special education and various other Title I funds. What is it that we are not providing with that money? So it doesn't have to be an answer now.
I can't answer it. Well, we can get you that. But in the meeting in December, we can give you an update on the budget cuts at that time and what we have the information. No idea what were our savings and where were our savings and where we're saving right now. Right now, our expenditures are about, through October, I just been report about 6% less this year than last year. So we are in our. I didn't check the revenues. Not all the revenues are in yet, but we are on the expenditure side. So we're looking. If we can keep that up, if we can keep it in a reasonable range, so that next week the goal is to end 17-18 in the positive number.
Yes. And it looks like we're headed that way.
Looks like we're headed that way, yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
For the brief. Okay, we're up to the consent agenda, and I'd like to ask the board if you would like to pull an agenda item for discussion.
I could pull on 4.9, the big history project.
But also at 4.12, the travel authorizations.
Actually, so I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 4.12 and 4.09.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion passes. And Magda, oh, sorry, Ross, 4.12, please.
I know we have to approve all out-of-state travel, and even if it's not being funded by the district, I'd still like to know how much it's going to cost. Some of the others didn't have cost numbers, even if it was being provided by a booster or whatever it was, I'd like to know how much it's going to cost, in case that in the future we could fund it out of the general fund. But I don't have any issues with it.
Mr. Bailey, to approach the podium and share additional information, please. Thank you.
Yeah, this is I appreciate the question. Some of the approvals for field trips, you'll notice one of them, we're not in that season yet. Wrestling is one of them. Difficult to know what that is, so you'll notice the broad piece. Our office will approve those and get actuals at that time, once we learn that. For the other ones, we do know, and then we know where those are, but definitely good question, and then get the actual costs listed for that.
All right, 4.9, Magda, please.
Oh, yeah, so I was really interested to hear about this project. It sounds really worthwhile. And I was just curious, getting a little more information, including, as it mentioned, 12 teachers and 6 school sites. So I was curious about which schools and you know, how many classrooms.
So the Big History project started because we did the 9th grade history was up for curriculum review, and we looked at traditional textbooks and also the Big History. And the Big History project was started by by an offshoot of the Gates Foundation. And so we decided that we needed to do a field test of the Big History project because it's so different from traditional history teaching, and it's much more activity-based, much more student-centered, and it also is not strictly chronological. It looks at more thresholds and starts way back with, well, it's replacing world history, or it's covering, the course is world history, the 9th grade world history. So we asked for volunteers to pilot this, and all of the high schools, including the academies, are included, and we have anywhere from 1 to 5 teachers per school, and around 700 students are involved. Amy Abrams is spearheading this, and when it became obvious that we needed to do a lot of training and we didn't have the funding, she went to the Gates Foundation, requested money, and got $20,000. I don't know how much more, I mean, I'll stop unless you have other questions.
Do we know yet about like the relevancy to the student piece? I'm really interested in that, and like, is this a way for to learn about things that historically we haven't learned about history, such as some of our indigenous peoples or other groups whose history isn't always covered in traditional?
It certainly does cover a lot that isn't normally covered, and it starts with the Big Bang Theory, and then, like the origin, and then origin stories, and it moves up, but it moves up within themes rather than just chronologically, although as the year progresses, it gets more chronological. But yes, it does cover a whole range of topics, and it also really encourages student writing. The students do more writing than they've ever done. Their essays get sent out to University of Arizona for scoring, also through Turnitin.com does scoring, and then the teachers, of course, also look at the essays, and but they have help. And one of the wonderful things about Big History is that it's an open educational resource, so it doesn't cost any money. However, teachers do need a lot of training. So we have the Big History, the grant allows for 5 training sessions throughout the year, and we've had 2 of them already. So to your question of how is it being received by students, the teachers have both the teachers have reported, and Amy, going in and observing, has reported that the students are very enthusiastic. They said they like history for the first time. You know, they really feel involved in it and they understand it more than they had in the past. So we're only in November, but we're, you know, progressing through the year with this.
I have a question too, sort of along the same lines, maybe it's the same thing I have to ask, but I know when I did world history, it was always European world history. It wasn't Asian world history or African history or anything like that, so are the different?
Yes, very much
It's
so.
really world?
It's really world.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. And how is it, how are they going to be assessed in the end to know whether this is, I'm saying critical thinking?
Yeah, what we have as sort of a test, a way of assessing well, they do assessments as part of each unit anyway. But we have 2 performance tasks that we're going to ask all of the 9th grade students, the core 9th grade students, not the AP, to take. So the kids who are getting big history and the kids who are getting more of the standard, and we're going to do a comparison.
Good, that should be interesting. I'll look forward to that.
So after we do this, so obviously a pilot, what's our district assessment to figure out whether we're going to continue it?
Yeah, that still has to be worked out, I think, because we have our standard practice for curriculum review and adoption, but we don't normally do a full-scale field test for a year of one. So we do have a point of comparison, but actually, who will actually be involved in voting for it? Whether you go back to the original curriculum committee, but then a lot of the teachers piloting work on that. So I think Dr. Harmon and I will have to work that out because we don't have, the standard procedures don't entirely apply. But you can be certain that we will do it in a fair, legitimate way.
So I had lots of comments that I've received I'd like to share, not to be negative, but these are just maybe opposing points, you could say it that way, and let me know what you, how we're responding. I've had a number of comments made from teachers and students as well on that it's clashing with the 8th grade social studies ancient history. There's an overlap. And so we may be duplicating. So you may not have all the answers to this, but I'm just giving you the input that I have. There's also concerns about overlap with science. And if we're actually providing redundant information. And so one of the questions that I had is going to the question about it being a pilot. What's the plan on using it, and if there's going to be a committee that is going to make a decision, and if there is a committee, can it be more spread out so that it's not just one school that may actually like the program, but there's another school that's observing that this program is not working well with their students.
Yeah, with any sort of very different approach, innovative approach to instruction, you're going to get people who are instant supporters. You're also going to get people who struggle more with it, and we are doing our very best to support the needs of all of those, you know, however the teachers are feeling. I'm certainly, as you're hearing, it's not a unanimous, you know, love for it, but a lot of the teachers do feel very strongly. So in terms of the criticisms that you voiced, it does go back to, it does cover all of world history as opposed to, and 8th grade does the early stuff, but AP world history we're in the same boat because AP world history by its nature of the course goes back to the very beginning also. So that is something that we are going to have to think about. We're not certain that we're going to adopt big history because, you know, there is a democratic process to it. But that would be one of the things to think about. In terms of I forgot what your other,
Just the overlap with science.
oh yeah,
as
overlap
well.
with science, okay. That, because it starts with the Big Bang, it does have some scientific pieces in it at the beginning. However, it's from the perspective of the history of science and the history of the formation of the universe rather than from a scientific viewpoint. But there are certain people who believe that it's got more science in it than it should. Other people think it's welcome because it is presenting the history of science, and history should be more than just the history of, history should be broad enough perhaps to accommodate a history of many different things.
Does it follow the social studies?
Um,
The social studies fields?
Yes, it does cover all of the social studies standards, and in fact, it's even more applicable to the Common Core history standards because it has much more student involvement and much more writing. There are, reading and writing standards in the Common Core. And so it definitely deals with all of, any of the standards. That's no issue at all. And your question about the committee, I was just saying, I'm not sure. We're going to have to work out.
Okay, thank you so much. Before we vote, I need to recuse myself from this particular discussion because I am working for a party that is involved in this project. So I will not be voting. So let's see. I'd like to ask the board to make a motion to approve 4.12 travel authorization and 4.1. Let's start with 4.12.
I said it.
I'll second that. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Thank you. And next, 4.09, I'd like a motion to approve 4.09. 4.09.
I said it.
I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Okay, motion passes. All right. We are up to Board of Directors informational financial statement, 5.01. Are there any comments, questions? No. General fund object of expenditure report. Questions or comments? All right. We will move on to 6.0, our communication from the audience. Our students are leaving if you're planning to speak. All right, we have several cards here. Parker Timmerman, Brandon Grove will be next. So first up is Parker Timmerman, and you will be speaking to my right on the podium. I don't know if he's here. Really? No, Parker. Brandon Grove. Also left, okay. Grant Miller. Okay, Grant is here. And you'll have 3 minutes to speak at the podium.
Is this about, whatever?
Whatever you'd like to speak.
I'd like to talk about the budget cuts that are affecting schools.
Anything.
So, what should the high schools and students be expecting in the upcoming future as far as budget cuts go? What should we be looking out for? What can we do to help potentially?
Yeah, Grant, as I mentioned earlier, and I should have reiterated, this is an opportunity for the board to listen for understanding and not respond to questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was in the hall, but.
No worries. So we can get back to you with the questions.
All right, my bad, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Simon, yours? No? Okay. Sumia Dastida? Okay. Parker Timmerman. Okay. Brandon Groy. Not here. Okay. All right. Then we will go with the next step, legislative update.
I sent to you all today a forward, and maybe you adopted also directly from Jessica, that was that came out with the one pager with the priorities that came from the legislative assembly and that are pretty much in line with the other organizations' agendas too. So now that we have those, we can start sharing those with the legislative. And I've been working with Karen to schedule an appointment with Dr. Watts, which I think we've got a date picked for that, where we will be strategizing about how we want to invite, to what we want, which legislators we want to invite and what that forum is going to be like. And then I will get that initiated before you all follow.
Thank you, President Megiddo, members of the board, Ms. Halley, and to our community members, staff, and students who've stayed the course. We appreciate those who either shared or have the desire to share, and perhaps we'll hear from you and even a local school visit near you. I want to begin by saying that this evening we began with, I think, part of what many people may not realize is our school board director's primary role and responsibility is to manage effective policy. And in fact, it's as close to legacy work as I could possibly imagine. The policy, when it's working well, the only way that it can be changed is through a vote. When I think about our operational policies, our reform policies that we have in mind, it's an understatement to say that it is quite possibly some of the most important work that we can engage in and collaborate. And I thank our staff and certainly Dr. Harmon for leadership and the staff who are supporting that work so that we can make more informed recommendations. Speaking of our policy, I think about race and equity policy that is now enables Kent School District to be one of 5, 295 school districts to have a race and equity policy. I may have the number underestimated, but we're close. And why that's important is that what we don't want to create is a policy that is in word only. It must be in deed, and indeed we have opportunities for equity, excellence, and community leadership every day. So while we gain media attention for great work that's taking place in the classrooms and excellent work from our teachers and our principals and our families who are supporting the work, we also gain some attention that helps us understand what we need to improve. And that's the way I look at it. It's neither bad nor good. We're always working to improve. But I will say that some of the most recent incidents that have occurred in our schools, it bears repeating. I had an amazing opportunity this week to have an after-action review with some tremendously talented and committed leaders who recognize first that we have to call the thing the thing. We have to identify the problem before we can solve it. And by doing that, we also realize that we have to recreate a sense of urgency. Because here's when we articulated our responsiveness this way. So we respond to incidents very well as an organization, K-12 organizations. What we need to do better, what we need to improve, and we recognize is that we need to not only respond to the incidents that occur, we need to be even more responsive to the people whom the incidents may have caused more hurt or pain, or allowed more pain that had occurred previously to resurface. And so we asked ourselves, what could we do? How do we ensure that sense of urgency is increased? Because if you you listen to harassment, intimidation, bullying conversations, if you hear a fire alarm, if you hear any alert that says there's an intruder in the building, we know how to respond. In fact, we respond intuitively with action. It's swift. And what we realize in our heart of hearts, our best intentions, what we've discovered is that we're trying to sometimes get it perfect when the right work means we need to communicate with our families early and often. My fingerprints are on when I had a conversation with one of our family members who was in pain. And this parent, this family member, this community member, this leader shared with me openly and honestly, and I listened and I understood, and I said, what for the community may have been 3 days or 2.5, whatever the case may be. I said I put myself in a position where, and we may have all been there at some point in time, when you're waiting for that urgent piece of information, and 1 second can feel like 1 year. And that allowed us to, in this meeting, to truly empathize and lead with equity, to say, I need to meet our community members where they are. So we will be more responsive, we will be better, and we have to, because while I don't want to normalize what's happening in this country, or what's happening in our community, we're a microcosm of this country, this world, we also have to take special care of those around us, to lead with love, to make sure that those who are hurting, that they have the opportunity to heal. And I will say this, we are still making sure those who are perpetrating these acts of bigotry and hatred, that we want to find out who they are, where they are, and why, and make sure that we put steps in place so that doesn't happen again. I do want to say to those who've been impacted, we're sorry that we have to go through this. At the same time, I don't know that we would be here to improve if we didn't. And finally, speaking of our freedoms, we celebrate and observe Veterans Day on Friday. And while we were at 8:26, I would ask anyone to stand, but I would ask you to raise your hand if you have served in our countries or in our country's military. Thank you for your service. And I would ask for those, if you have a relative who served or is currently serving, thank you, thank them for their service. And if you haven't raised your hand, I'll ask one more question. Usually gets everyone in the room. Do you know someone, or have you seen a show that has someone who looks like they've served in the military? Thank you. Thank you for your service. And what that means is that we are honoring those who have given the ultimate sacrifice in many ways. They've given their life, they've given their, sometimes a part of themselves, literally, to defend our freedoms, to protect us from harm that we may see or not see. And the freedoms that sometimes we forget, that we take advantage of. And I am proud to live in this country. I'm honored to serve in this richly diverse city and in this amazing school district alongside tremendously talented, committed leaders for the purpose of getting better and making sure we take full advantage of the freedoms that we have. That concludes my report. Thank you.
So just a quick reminder, thank you, Agda, for sending me information. So if you have any thoughts about how we can share information better as a board, if you could get those to me by Friday, that'd be great, as I'm putting together my presentation. I also had an opportunity, I was at Kent Elementary this week for doing my mentoring, and I took an opportunity to just look in some of the hallways, and it was very inspiring, some of the things that they had up there. And then I also went and visited the library because I wanted to know what maybe I take advantage at the beginning of my mentoring session every time to read while the young man eats his lunch.
And so I said, can you help me find some books that might be appropriate? And I was very impressed with the librarian staff there, how they could identify, they knew exactly who I was speaking about as a student, and they were able to give me very specific things that would help, which I was just very impressed with that. So I appreciated that as well. So.
Well, I've had opportunity to learn a lot recently. So I was at the Restorative Justice Workshop that was at Kent Meridian High School in partnership with the district and Puget Sound ESD and Restorative Justice Center. And I just learned so much and was so inspired. So I encourage you all, if you have opportunity to participate, because there will be more forums. And Dr. Watts was an inspiring speaker, as well as Mr. Brad Brown. One of the things that Mr. Brown shared, and I urge you to all do this too, is he gave the analogy of a gazelle and a lion going after the gazelle, and that it's not just one lion that would go after and get the gazelle by itself. And so the equity work that we're doing really is about going after the gazelle, fighting the racism, the bullying, the oppression that we're seeing. And so we all need our own pride. So we all took a moment, his urging, and wrote down the 5 people who are part of our pride. So I encourage you to do that, to support you in this important work that we're doing. I also was at the Kent Hope fundraiser. I got to see Maya there and sit with other people from the district, and I really appreciated seeing the support for homeless families in our neighborhood by having the district representative there. And I was really inspired by a young woman who was a speaker, and her 2 young children were there with her, and she'd been really helped by Kent Hope, and one of her children ran up to her on the stage there. So it just reminded me how important working with our partners in the community to help meet all the needs of our families, how important that is. And then third thing I had the opportunity to go to was the reception for this year's cohort of people who are participating in the UW's Pre-K through 3rd Grade Institute at the Gates Foundation, and really enjoyed learning from the folks from our district as well as other teams, and in particular one of our district's cohorts. They were looking at social emotional supports and making resources more readily available to families and child care providers around how to support children socially, emotionally. And then the other exciting thing I heard, and so I'll follow up with you all when it becomes available, but I learned that the National Journal, which is called Standards for State Boards of Education, is coming out with an article on early learning in January in their edition. So I look forward to see what information will be provided there.
Well, I was also at the grand finale of the University of Washington Pre-K, the 3rd certification program at the Gates Institute, and I'm proud to say that Agda and Paige and Alice Humphreys were in the, I guess it was the 2nd cohort that they did, and then I was in the 3rd cohort along with some other people from the district, and then we have another cohort that's just finished now. So I told the 2 groups from our district that we would expect them to present at a board meeting. And they said they were a little more worried about doing that than presenting actually at the foundation. I said, don't worry, we're good. But it's just so that early learning is so important. It's just, we can't overemphasize how important that is, and everything we can do to shore that up in our community will be greatly appreciated. Is not the word, but it will be
good.
That'd be good. The word's gone, sorry. I also was at the Kent Youth and Family Services fundraiser, and that was quite a big deal. That was the first time I've been there, and it was a big deal, and heard a lot about what KYFS does, and just, they partner with us in so many ways, and I was happy to be there to support them. Also went to the Kent Ridge Jazz Band and Drumline concert. I was there, we went together, and I just was so impressed with the director, first name, I think it's Brian, but Atkinson, so enthusiastic and so pleased that he started the drum line this year, and he was doing the teacher thing. He was telling us this is what we've learned right now, and then as we go progress, we're going to be learning more fancy stuff, and by the end, you just won't believe us, and the big parades and stuff. So his enthusiasm was very infectious. So I thought it's really great for those kids to be involved with him. So that's all I've got.
Did not get to do as much fun stuff.
That's okay.
But I look forward to, and next week there's a annual conference. A lot of school board directors from around the state will be in town in Bellevue, networking with them, and then going forward.
All right. I just want to first thank Dr. Watts for what he said about building community. These past 2 weeks, I think I've fielded more calls regarding our students and our Muslim students and our Sikh students from around the country, the concerns that people had. And I don't know, I usually call or text Dr. Watts and say, can we please do something and do it quickly. And so I appreciate hearing that we need to do this. We need to communicate more and more effectively and more often. Because I think, we need to, whenever something happens, we just need to put out a statement that we really care about our students, and which we do, but it just doesn't come across in our district. And, when people are wondering what's happening, that just engenders more mistrust. And so we have a lot of work to do, and it's not one department's role. I think it's all of our responsibility, and we all have to think about how we are going to communicate what we do for our students and how we react. We talk about professional development. All of those things are connected to what's happening in our school grounds or out of our school grounds. I too want to say that I came to this country 42 years ago, and we were learning under a kerosene lamp. That's how we learned. And to be at the place where I'm at, and in an elected position, I don't take that for granted. And there are a lot of families just trying to struggle, figure out how to get through their day. So I guess I just want to say, when we talk about Veterans Day, it also means a lot to me that I'm in this country, and so many opportunities have been afforded to me, but there are so many that are struggling, and we have to figure out, what is the best way to address those needs and do it quickly. We just have not succeeded, over the many, many years. This communication issue comes up time after time, and we haven't figured this out, and I really feel like that has to be our priority in the coming year. And finally, in line with that, I want to say that tomorrow at Ken Phoenix Academy, there's a gentleman who's going to speak from the Navy, who is a Navy veteran photographer, who's going to be speaking to our kids from 2:30 to 3:30. If anybody would like to join, he's invited the board and Dr. Watts, if you're able to make it. And I also wanted to thank Dr. Hansing and her family and everybody who was part of the Kent board, doing wonderful things for the community. Thank you all for everything you do for our school district. Okay? And so with that said, we are adjourned here, but the board has an executive session immediately following. And so we will bid you a great good night and happy safe travels.